There are some people in this world who walk through life without making a sound. They sit in the back of classrooms. They eat lunch alone. They speak only when spoken to, and even then, their voices come out so soft that others have to lean in just to hear them. Maya Lin was one of those people. She was born in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and gossip travels faster than the morning news. Her family wasn't rich, but they weren't poor either. They were somewhere in the middle, just getting by like most families do. Her father worked long hours at a factory that made car parts. Her mother cleaned houses for wealthy families on the other side of town. Together, they raised 3 children in a tiny house with thin walls and a leaky roof that nobody ever seemed to fix. Maya was the middle child. If you know anything about middle children, you know they often get lost in the shuffle. Her older brother was loud and athletic, the kind of boy who filled every room he entered with energy and noise. He played football and basketball and baseball, and their father never missed a single game. Her younger sister was adorable and funny, with big brown eyes and a smile that could melt anyone's heart. She was the baby of the family, and their mother treated her like a little princess. And then there was Maya. Quiet Maya. Invisible Maya. The girl who could sit at the dinner table for an entire meal without saying a single word. And nobody would even notice. It wasn't that her parents didn't love her. They did, in their own tired and distracted way. But there were bills to pay and problems to solve. And only so many hours in a day. Maya learned early on that if she wanted attention, she would have to fight for it. But fighting wasn't in her nature. So, instead, she learned to disappear. School was no different. She had no real friends, just a few classmates who would nod at her in the hallway, or ask to borrow a pencil. Teachers rarely called on her because she never raised her hand. When group projects came around, she was always the last one picked, standing awkwardly while teams formed around her. She wasn't bullied exactly. That would have required people to notice her in the first place. She was simply overlooked, like a piece of furniture that had always been there but nobody really saw anymore. Maya spent most of her childhood feeling like a ghost in her own life. She would watch other kids laugh and play and form friendships that seemed so easy and natural. She wondered what was wrong with her. Why couldn't she be like them? Why did words get stuck in her throat every time she tried to speak up? Why did her heart race with fear at the thought of being the center of attention? But here's the thing about quiet people. Just because they don't make noise doesn't mean nothing is happening inside them. Maya had a whole world living in her head, full of dreams and feelings and thoughts she could never quite put into words. She felt things deeply, maybe too deeply. A sad movie could make her cry for hours. A beautiful sunset could fill her chest with an ache she couldn't explain. She noticed things other people missed, like the way light fell through windows in the late afternoon, or the sound of rain tapping against glass, or the expressions on people's faces when they thought no one was watching. She just didn't know how to share any of it. Everything changed the summer she turned 8 years old. Her grandmother on her mother's side lived alone in a small house about 20 minutes away. Grandma Chen was a tiny woman with silver hair and hands that shook slightly when she poured tea. She had come to America from China 50 years ago with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. And she had built a life through hard work and determination. Maya's mother would drop her off there on weekends when she had extra cleaning jobs to do. Most kids would have been bored at their grandmother's house. There was no internet, no video games, no other children to play with. But Maya loved it there. The house was quiet and peaceful, filled with the smell of jasmine, tea, and old books. And in the corner of the living room, pushed against the wall like it had been waiting for someone to find it, was an old, upright piano. The piano had belonged to Maya's grandfather, who had passed away before she was born. Nobody had played it in years. The wood was scratched and faded, and some of the keys stuck when you pressed them. But to Maya, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She still remembered the first time she touched it. Her grandmother was taking a nap in the other room, and Maya was wandering around the house with nothing to do. She walked over to the piano and ran her fingers across the keys, pressing one down gently. The sound that came out was soft and warm, like a voice speaking just to her. Something clicked inside her that day. Something woke up. She started pressing more keys, listening to how they sounded together, figuring out which combinations were pleasing and which ones clashed. She had no idea what she was doing. She had never taken a music lesson in her life. But somehow, it didn't matter. The piano made sense to her in a way that nothing else ever had. From that day on, Maya lived for her visits to Grandma Chen's house. While her grandmother cooked or read or watched television, Maya would sit at that old piano for hours. She taught herself to play by ear, picking out melodies from songs she heard on the radio. When she got home, she would sneak onto the family computer late at night and watch videos of pianists performing. She studied their hands, the way their fingers moved, the way they swayed with the music. Then she would practice what she learned on a paper keyboard she drew herself, pressing imaginary keys on her bed until she fell asleep. Nobody knew about any of this. Maya never told anyone. Not her parents, not her siblings, not the few classmates who occasionally spoke to her. The piano was her secret, her private world, the one place where she didn't feel invisible. When she played, all the feelings trapped inside her finally had somewhere to go. The sadness, the loneliness, the longing to be seen and understood. It all poured out through her fingers and into the music. Years passed. Maya grew taller but stayed just as quiet. She moved through middle school like a shadow, earning decent grades but making no impression on anyone. At home, she helped with chores without being asked and never complained about anything. She was the easy child, the one who never caused problems, the one who required no attention. But every Sunday, without fail, she would sit at her grandmother's piano and play. And in those moments, she wasn't invisible anymore. In those moments, she was alive. She had no idea that her whole life was about to change. She had no idea that someone was about to hear her play. And she certainly had no idea that the quiet girl who had spent her entire life being overlooked was about to make an audience of hundreds rise to their feet and cheer. But that part of the story comes later. For now, Maya was just a 15-year-old girl with a secret talent and a heart full of music, waiting for the world to finally see her. The announcement came on a Monday morning in October, right after the principal finished reading the daily notices over the intercom. Maya was sitting in her usual spot in homeroom, third row from the back, near the window where nobody would bother her. She was doodling in her notebook, half listening, when the words caught her attention. A citywide talent competition, open to all high school students. The winner would receive a $10,000 scholarship and a chance to perform at the city's annual arts festival. Sign-ups would be posted outside the main office starting today. The classroom buzzed with excitement. Students turned to each other, already talking about what they would do. A girl in the front row said she had been taking voice lessons since she was 6. A boy near the door mentioned his band had been practicing for months. Everyone seemed to have something, some talent they were ready to show the world. Maya looked down at her notebook and kept doodling. The thought of entering never even crossed her mind. By lunchtime, the sign-up sheet outside the main office was already filling up with names. Maya walked past it, on her way to the cafeteria, glancing at the growing list. She recognized most of the names. There was the girl who sang solos at every school concert. There was the boy whose parents had paid for years of violin lessons at a fancy music academy downtown. There were dancers and drummers and kids who played guitar in local coffee shops on weekends. These were the talented ones, the special ones, the ones who had been groomed and trained and polished for moments exactly like this. Maya kept walking. She ate her lunch alone that day, same as always. She sat at a small table in the corner of the cafeteria, picking at a sandwich her mother had made that morning. Around her, conversations floated by like background noise. Everyone was talking about the competition. Who would win? Who had the best chance? Who would embarrass themselves trying? Nobody looked at Maya. Nobody wondered what hidden talents the quiet girl in the corner might have. And that was fine with her. At least, that's what she told herself. But something strange happened that afternoon. Maya couldn't stop thinking about the piano. She thought about it during math class, while the teacher droned on about equations she already understood. She thought about it during history, while her classmates took notes on events that happened long before any of them were born. She thought about it during the long bus ride home, staring out the window at the gray October sky. What would it feel like to play for people? Real people. Not just her grandmother dozing in the other room. What would it feel like to sit at a piano on a real stage, with lights shining down, and an audience waiting to hear what she could do? The thought terrified her. But it also stirred something deep in her chest. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. She pushed it down. She was being ridiculous. Girls like her didn't enter talent competitions. Girls like her stayed invisible. Stayed safe. Stayed out of the way. That was how it had always been. That was how it would always be. 2 weeks later, everything changed because of a man named Raymond Torres. Mr. Torres was the night janitor at Maya's high school. He had worked there for almost 30 years. Long enough to watch thousands of students come and go. He was a quiet man in his 60s, with gray hair and kind eyes and hands that were rough from decades of hard work. Most students didn't even know his name. They walked past him in the hallways without a second glance, too busy with their own lives to notice the man pushing a mop or emptying trash cans. But Mr. Torres noticed everything. That was the thing about being invisible. You learned to see what others missed. He had noticed Maya years ago, back when she was a freshman. He saw the way she walked through the halls with her head down, the way she ate lunch alone every single day, the way she flinched slightly whenever someone spoke too loudly near her. He recognized something in her because he had been the same way once, a long time ago. Shy, overlooked, carrying a whole world inside that nobody else could see. On that particular Thursday evening, Mr. Torres was working late. Most of the students and teachers had gone home hours ago. The hallways were dark and empty, and the only sound was the soft squeak of his cartwheels on the linoleum floor. He was heading toward the auditorium to clean up after a drama club rehearsal when he heard something that made him stop in his tracks. Music. Piano music. Coming from inside the auditorium. Mr. Torres frowned. The auditorium was supposed to be empty. He walked closer, pushing open the heavy door just a crack, and peered inside. There, on the big stage at the front of the room, a girl was sitting at the old piano that nobody ever used. The stage lights were off, and the only illumination came from the emergency exit signs casting a dim red glow across the space. But even in that faint light, Mr. Torres could see who it was. It was the quiet girl. The one who always ate alone. Maya, and she was playing like nothing he had ever heard before. The music filled the empty auditorium, rising and falling like waves on an ocean. It was a classical piece, something complicated and beautiful that Mr. Torres didn't recognize. But it wasn't just the notes that took his breath away. It was the feeling behind them. There was so much emotion pouring out of that piano, so much sadness and longing and something else. Something that sounded like a heart crying out to be heard. Mr. Torres stood frozen in the doorway, his mop forgotten in his hand. He felt tears forming in his eyes, and he didn't even try to stop them. In 30 years of working at this school, he had heard plenty of students play music. Some of them were good. A few of them were even great. But this was different. This was special. This was the kind of talent that comes along once in a lifetime. Maya played for almost 20 minutes, lost in her own world, completely unaware that anyone was listening. When she finally finished, her hands resting gently on the keys, the silence that followed was heavy and full. That's when she heard someone clapping. Maya spun around so fast she nearly fell off the piano bench. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she squinted into the darkness, trying to see who was there. When she spotted Mr. Torres walking down the aisle toward the stage, still clapping slowly, her face turned bright red. "I'm sorry," she stammered, already gathering her backpack, already preparing to run. "I know I'm not supposed to be here. I'll leave right now. Please don't report me. I'm so sorry." "Hold on," Mr. Torres said, his voice gentle. "Just hold on a minute." Maya froze, clutching her backpack to her chest like a shield. Mr. Torres climbed the steps to the stage and walked over to where she stood. Up close, he could see that her hands were trembling. This poor girl, he thought, so scared of being seen, How long have you been playing like that? He asked. Maya shook her head, confused by the question. I don't know. A few years, I guess. Who's your teacher? I don't have one. I taught myself, from videos and stuff. Mr. Torres stared at her for a long moment. Then he let out a low whistle and shook his head in disbelief. You taught yourself to play like that? Maya nodded, still not understanding why he wasn't angry, why he wasn't telling her to leave, why he was looking at her like she had just done something incredible instead of something wrong. Young lady, Mr. Torres said softly, do you have any idea how talented you are? Maya didn't know how to answer that. Nobody had ever asked her anything like it before. You need to enter that competition, he continued. The talent show. You need to sign up. The words hit Maya like a bucket of cold water. She shook her head immediately, backing away. No. No. I can't do that. I can't play in front of people. I'm not like the other kids. I'm not good enough. Not good enough? Mr. Torres almost laughed. Girl, I've been working in this school for 30 years. I've seen every kind of talent you can imagine. And I'm telling you right now, what you just played on that piano is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in this building. Maya felt tears burning in her eyes. She wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly. But the fear was too strong, too deeply rooted after years of being nobody. I can't, she whispered. I'm sorry, I just can't. She ran past him, down the stage steps, up the aisle, and out of the auditorium before he could say another word. Mr. Torres watched her go, standing alone on that empty stage. He looked at the old piano. Then, at the door Maya had just disappeared through, he thought about all the years he had spent being invisible himself, all the dreams he had let die because he was too afraid to chase them. Then he made a decision. The next morning, a new name appeared on the sign-up sheet outside the main office. It was written in neat, careful handwriting that didn't belong to any student. Maya Lin. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change forever. Maya found out on a Friday morning, and she will never forget the way her stomach dropped when she saw it. She was walking to her first class, head down as usual, weaving through the crowded hallway without making eye contact with anyone. As she passed the main office, she noticed a small group of students gathered around the sign-up sheet for the talent competition. They were laughing about something, pointing at the list and whispering to each other. Maya would have kept walking. She had no reason to stop. But then she heard her own name. Maya Lin? Who is that? I don't know. I've never even heard of her. Wait. Isn't she that weird, quiet girl who sits alone at lunch? Maya's feet stopped moving. Her blood turned cold. She pushed through the small crowd, ignoring the surprised looks, and stared at the sign-up sheet with wide eyes. There it was, right at the bottom of the list, written in handwriting she didn't recognize. Maya Lin. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. This had to be a mistake. This had to be some kind of cruel joke. She hadn't signed up. She would never sign up. Someone was trying to humiliate her. Then she remembered the janitor. Mr. Torres. The way he had looked at her in the auditorium. The way he had told her she needed to enter. He had done this. He had put her name on that list without asking her. Maya's first instinct was to march into the office and demand they remove her name. She would explain that it was a mistake, that she never agreed to this, that there was no way she was getting on any stage in front of anyone. But before she could move, the bell rang, and the crowd scattered. She stood there alone, staring at her name like it was a death sentence. The rest of that day was a nightmare. Word spread fast in high school. By lunch, it seemed like everyone knew that the quiet girl nobody ever noticed had signed up for the talent competition. And nobody could figure out why. Maya heard the whispers everywhere she went. In the hallways, in the bathroom, in the back of classrooms when teachers weren't paying attention. What's she even going to do? Does she have a talent? Maybe she's going to just stand there and be awkward. This is going to be so embarrassing. I almost feel bad for her. Some students laughed openly when she walked by. Others gave her pitying looks that somehow felt even worse. A few of the serious competitors, the ones who had trained for years and actually expected to win, seemed annoyed that someone like her would even dare to enter. Maya spent her lunch period hiding in a bathroom stall, crying as quietly as she could so nobody would hear. When she got home that afternoon, things didn't get any better. Her mother was in the kitchen making dinner when Maya walked through the door. Her younger sister was at the table doing homework, and her older brother was sprawled on the couch watching sports highlights on his phone. "Maya," her mother said without looking up, "I got a call from your school today. Something about a talent competition?" Maya froze in the doorway. She had hoped, somehow, that she could figure this out before her family found out. But of course, that wasn't going to happen. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "It's a mistake. I didn't sign up." Her mother turned around, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "The woman from the office said your name is on the list. She wanted to confirm we knew about it. Someone else put my name there. I'm going to get it removed." "What would you even do in a talent competition?" her brother called from the couch, not bothering to look up from his phone. "You don't do anything." The words hit Maya like a punch to the chest. She knew her brother didn't mean to be cruel. He was just stating what everyone in the family believed. Maya was the quiet one, the boring one, the one with no special skills or talents worth mentioning. "I play piano," Maya said softly. Now everyone looked at her. Her mother, her sister, even her brother put down his phone. "Since when?" her mother asked. "Since I was 8, at Grandma's house. I've been teaching myself." Her mother's expression shifted from surprise to concern. "Maya, those competitions are serious. The other kids have been taking lessons for years. Professional lessons. I don't want you to go up there and get hurt." "You mean embarrass myself?" "That's not what I said. But that's what you meant." The kitchen went quiet. Maya felt tears threatening to spill again, but she refused to cry in front of her family. She had done enough crying for one day. "I'm going to get my name removed," she said flatly. "Don't worry. I won't embarrass anyone." She went to her room and closed the door behind her. She lay on her bed and stared at the ceiling, feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. The next morning, Maya went to school early with one goal in mind. She was going to find whoever was in charge and demand they take her name off that list. This whole thing was a mistake, and she was going to fix it. But when she walked through the front doors, Mr. Torres was waiting for her. He was standing near the main office, holding a cup of coffee like he had been there for a while. When he saw Maya, he smiled gently and waved her over. "I figured you might be coming in early today," he said. Maya crossed her arms over her chest. "You had no right to do that. You signed me up without asking me." "I know, and I'm sorry for that. But I'm not sorry for believing in you. You don't even know me." "I know enough. I know that when you play piano, something happens that most people never experience in their entire lives. I know that you have a gift, and you're too scared to share it with anyone." Maya shook her head, frustration boiling up inside her. "I'm not like the other kids in that competition. They've had real training, real teachers. I taught myself from YouTube videos. Do you understand how stupid I'm going to look up there?" Mr. Torres took a slow sip of his coffee before answering. "Let me tell you something about myself. When I was your age, I wanted to be an artist. I loved to draw. I spent every spare moment sketching in notebooks, dreaming about going to art school someday. But my family was poor, and they told me art was a waste of time. They said I needed to be realistic. So I gave up. I stopped drawing. I got a job, paid my bills, lived my life, and I've spent the last 40 years wondering what would have happened if I had just been brave enough to try." He looked at Maya with eyes that held decades of regret. "I'm not going to watch you make the same mistake I did. Not when you have something this special." "What?" Maya didn't know what to say. She stood there, arms still crossed, but the anger was fading. In its place was something more complicated. Fear. Yes, but also a tiny spark of something else. Something that felt like possibility. "What if I fail?" she whispered. "Then you fail, and the world keeps spinning. But what if you don't?" Maya thought about her grandmother's piano. She thought about all the hours she had spent playing alone, pouring her heart into music that nobody ever heard. She thought about how it felt when she played, like she was finally saying all the things she could never put into words. "I don't know if I can do this," she said. "You don't have to know right now. Just don't quit before you even try." That night, Maya went to her grandmother's house. She sat at the old piano and played for hours, longer than she had ever played before. Her fingers moved across the keys, and the music that came out was different than usual. It was still sad, still full of longing, but there was something new in it too. Something that sounded almost like courage. When she finally stopped, her grandmother was standing in the doorway, watching her with tears in her eyes. "That was beautiful," the old woman said softly. Maya looked at her grandmother, at this tiny woman who had crossed an ocean with nothing but hope, and she made a decision. She wasn't going to remove her name from that list. She was going to compete. The next few weeks would be the hardest of her life. She would practice until her fingers ached. She would cry herself to sleep more nights than she could count. She would doubt herself over and over again. But she wasn't going to quit. Not this time. For the first time in her life, Maya Lin was going to let the world see who she really was. The night of the competition arrived faster than Maya expected. One moment she was practicing at her grandmother's house, telling herself she still had plenty of time. The next moment, she was standing backstage at the city auditorium, surrounded by performers who looked like they belonged there, and Maya felt like she was about to throw up. The auditorium was massive, bigger than anything she had ever seen. Red velvet seats stretched back in endless rows, and a huge crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling like something out of a movie. The stage was wide and polished, with professional lighting that made everything look sharp and bright. This wasn't some small school event. This was real. This was serious. Maya pressed her back against the wall backstage and tried to remember how to breathe. Around her, other contestants were warming up and getting ready. A girl with long black hair was doing vocal exercises, her voice running up and down scales with perfect precision. A boy in a crisp suit was tuning his violin, his fingers moving with the confidence of someone who had performed 100 times before. A dance crew was stretching in the corner, their matching outfits sparkling under the dim backstage lights. Everyone looked so calm, so prepared, so sure of themselves. Maya looked down at her own outfit. Her grandmother had spent 3 weeks making her dress by hand. It was simple. A soft blue fabric that reached just below her knees, with small white flowers embroidered along the hem. Her grandmother had stayed up late every night working on it, squinting through her reading glasses, making sure every stitch was perfect. It was the most beautiful thing Maya had ever owned. But standing here among all these polished performers, she felt like a fraud. Contestant number 14? Maya jumped at the sound of her name. A woman with a clipboard was looking around backstage, searching for someone. "That's me," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman checked something on her clipboard. "You're on in about 40 minutes. Make sure you're ready." 40 minutes. Maya's heart started racing even faster. She found a quiet corner away from the other performers and sat down on a folding chair. Her hands were shaking. Her mouth was dry. Every instinct in her body was screaming at her to run, to get out of here before it was too late, to go back to being invisible where it was safe. Then she felt a hand on her shoulder. She looked up and saw Mr. Torres standing there, dressed in a clean button-down shirt instead of his usual janitor uniform. He smiled at her. That same gentle smile from the night he had found her playing in the empty auditorium. "You came," Maya said, surprised. "Of course I came. I wouldn't miss this for anything." "I don't think I can do this, Mr. Torres. Everyone here is so good. They've been training their whole lives. I'm nobody." Mr. Torres pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the chaos of performers preparing around them. "You know what I've learned in all my years?" he said finally. "The people who change the world are never the ones who had everything handed to them. They're the ones who had to fight for every little thing. They're the ones who taught themselves, who practiced in secret, who kept going when nobody believed in them." He turned to look at her directly. "You're not nobody, Maya. You're someone who found music all on her own, without teachers or lessons or any of the advantages these other kids had. And you taught yourself to play in a way that made a tired old janitor cry. That's not nothing. That's everything. Maya felt tears stinging her eyes. She blinked them back, not wanting to ruin her makeup. Her mother had helped her with it that morning. The first time they had done something like that together in years. What if they laugh at me? She whispered. Then they laugh. But I don't think they will. I think they're going to hear something they've never heard before. A stagehand called out that the show was starting in 5 minutes. Mr. Torres stood up and squeezed Maya's shoulder one more time. Play the way you played that night in the auditorium. Play like nobody's watching. Play like it's just you and the piano, and all those feelings you've been holding inside for years. Then he walked away to find his seat, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts. The competition began. One by one, performers took the stage and showed the audience what they could do. Maya watched from the wings, her stomach in knots. The singer with the long black hair performed a powerful ballad that gave Maya chills. The violin player delivered a flawless classical piece that earned him a standing ovation from parts of the crowd. The dance crew moved in perfect sync, their choreography sharp and energetic. These people were incredible. They were trained. They were ready. What was Maya thinking? She didn't belong here. Contestant number 14. You're up next. The words hit Maya like ice water. She stood frozen, unable to move, unable to think. This was it. There was no more time. No more hiding. She walked toward the stage entrance on legs that felt like they might collapse at any second. She could hear the host announcing her name to the audience, but the words sounded distant and muffled, like they were coming from underwater. Our next performer is Maya Lin, a 15-year-old student who will be playing piano. That was her cue. Maya stepped out onto the stage. The lights were blinding. She couldn't see the audience, just a sea of darkness beyond the glare. But she could feel them, hundreds of people, all watching, all waiting to see what this unknown girl would do. Maya walked to the grand piano at the center of the stage. It was beautiful, black and shiny, so different from her grandmother's old upright. She sat down on the bench and placed her trembling hands on the keys. For a moment, she couldn't move. The fear was paralyzing. She thought about her mother's worried face that morning. She thought about her brother's words, that she didn't do anything. She thought about all the whispers and the laughter and the years of being invisible. Then she thought about her grandmother, sitting somewhere in that audience, wearing her best dress, believing in her. She thought about Mr. Torres, who saw something in her that nobody else could see. She thought about all the Sunday afternoons at that old piano, pouring her heart into music that nobody ever heard, and she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant. A gentle melody that floated out into the auditorium like a whisper. Maya had chosen to play Clair de Lune by Debussy, one of the first pieces she had ever taught herself. But she had also added something to it, her own variations, her own emotions woven into the music. As her fingers moved across the keys, something strange happened. The fear started to melt away. The audience disappeared. The bright lights faded. It was just Maya and the piano, the way it had always been in her grandmother's living room. She played the sadness she had carried her whole life. The loneliness of eating lunch alone. The pain of being forgotten. The ache of wanting so badly to be seen, and never knowing how. She played the hope, too. The small moments of beauty that kept her going. The warmth of her grandmother's smile. The kindness of a janitor who believed in her when nobody else did. She played everything she had never been able to say out loud. Every feeling that had been trapped inside her for 15 years came pouring out through her fingers. The music swelled and grew, filling every corner of that massive auditorium. It rose to a powerful crescendo that seemed to shake the air itself. Then it softened again, becoming gentle and tender, like a lullaby for a broken heart. When Maya played the final note, she let it hang in the air for a long moment before lifting her hands from the keys. The auditorium was completely silent. Maya sat there, suddenly aware of where she was again. The fear came rushing back. They hated it. They thought she was terrible. She had made a fool of herself in front of hundreds of people. She started to stand up, ready to run off the stage and never look back. And then she heard it. One person clapping, then another, then 10 more. then 100. The applause started slowly, but it grew fast, building like a wave until it crashed over the entire auditorium. People were standing up. Not just a few people. Everyone. Row after row, people rose to their feet, clapping so hard their hands must have hurt. Maya stood frozen at the piano, unable to process what was happening. In the front row, she saw her mother. Her mother, who had doubted her, who had worried she would embarrass herself. She was standing and clapping with tears streaming down her face. A few seats over, her father was on his feet too. And next to him, her brother and sister, looking at her like they were seeing her for the first time. In the back of the auditorium, Maya could just barely make out Mr. Torres. He wasn't clapping. He was just standing there, nodding slowly, with the biggest smile she had ever seen. The applause went on and on. It seemed like it would never stop. Maya had spent her whole life being invisible. She had spent 15 years feeling like nobody saw her, like nobody heard her, like she didn't matter. But right now, in this moment, every single person in that auditorium saw her, and they were cheering. Maya doesn't remember walking off the stage. She doesn't remember the other performers who came after her, or the rest of the competition. Everything after that standing ovation was a blur of noise and lights, and her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. What she does remember is sitting backstage afterward, staring at her hands like they belonged to someone else. These were the same hands that had practiced on a paper keyboard. The same hands that had played in secret for 7 years. And somehow, those hands had just made an entire auditorium full of strangers rise to their feet. Other contestants came up to her. People who had ignored her at school, who had laughed when they saw her name on the sign-up sheet. Now they were shaking her hand and telling her she was amazing. Maya didn't know what to say to any of them. She just nodded and smiled and tried not to cry. Then the host's voice came over the speakers, asking all the finalists to return to the stage for the results. Maya walked out with the other top performers. There were 5 of them standing in a line, facing the audience. The violin player was there. So was the singer with the long black hair and 2 members of the dance crew. And Maya, the girl nobody had expected to make it this far. The auditorium was buzzing with anticipation. Maya could see her family in the front row. Her mother was gripping her father's hand so tight her knuckles had turned white. Her grandmother sat beside them, calm and still, like she had known all along how this would end. The host opened an envelope with dramatic slowness. Maya's heart was beating so hard, she was sure everyone could hear it. In third place, with a prize of $2,000, the dance crew members stepped forward when their names were called. They hugged each other, grinning and waving at the crowd. In second place, with a prize of $5,000, the violin player. He nodded graciously, accepting the applause with practiced elegance. Maya felt dizzy. That left her and the singer. 2 people, 1 first-place prize. She looked over at the other girl, who had been training since she was 6 years old, who had a voice that could fill stadiums, who belonged on stages like this. There was no way Maya had won. She had already exceeded every expectation just by making it to the finals. That was enough. That was more than enough. And in first place, with a prize of $10,000 and an invitation to perform at the City Arts Festival. The host paused. The silence stretched out for what felt like forever. Maya Lin. For a moment, Maya didn't move. She wasn't sure she had heard correctly. But then the audience erupted again, even louder than before, and the host was gesturing for her to step forward, and the singer beside her was clapping and smiling and nodding like she had expected this all along. Maya walked to the center of the stage on legs that felt like water. Someone handed her a small trophy and a large check. Cameras flashed from every direction. People were shouting her name, and Maya Lin, the girl who had spent her entire life being invisible, stood in the spotlight and let the world see her cry. The weeks after the competition were like living in a dream. A video of Maya's performance was posted online by someone in the audience. Within 3 days, it had been viewed over 2 million times. Comments poured in from people all over the world. They called her a prodigy. They called her an inspiration. They said her music had made them feel things they couldn't put into words. News stations wanted to interview her. Music schools sent letters offering scholarships. A famous pianist who Maya had watched in countless YouTube videos reached out personally to offer her free lessons. Maya's life had changed overnight, but some things changed more slowly. Her family didn't become perfect. Her brother still teased her sometimes, and her sister still demanded most of their mother's attention. But there was something different now. A new kind of respect. Her father started coming home from work early on Sundays just to hear her practice. Her mother framed the newspaper article about Maya's win and hung it in the living room where everyone could see. And her grandmother. Her grandmother didn't say much. She never did. But the next time Maya came over to practice, there was a brand new piano bench waiting for her, with a soft cushion and a little bow on top. The old woman had spent her savings on it without telling anyone. Maya cried when she saw it. Her grandmother just patted her hand and said, "Play something beautiful." At school, things were different too. People who had never spoken to Maya before suddenly wanted to be her friend. She was invited to parties and study groups and lunch tables that had always been closed to her. It was overwhelming and confusing, and Maya wasn't sure how she felt about it. But there was one person whose friendship she knew was real. Mr. Torres retired at the end of that school year. On his last day, Maya found him in the auditorium one more time, sweeping the floor like he had done for 30 years. "You're really leaving?" she asked. "Time to rest these old bones," he said with a smile. "Besides, my work here is done." Maya didn't know how to thank him. Words seemed too small for what he had given her. So instead, she sat down at the piano on the stage and played for him one last time. She played the same piece she had performed that night he discovered her. But this time, she wasn't hiding. This time, she played it just for him. When she finished, Mr. Torres had tears in his eyes. "You know," he said quietly, "I've spent my whole life wondering what would have happened if I had chased my dreams. If I had been brave enough to share my art with the world, I'll never know the answer to that question. But watching you up there, doing what I was too scared to do, that was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." End quote. Maya walked over and hugged him. A janitor and a piano player. Two invisible people who had finally been seen. 5 years later, Maya performed at Carnegie Hall. She was 20 years old, studying at one of the best music conservatories in the country on a full scholarship. She had played concerts across America and Europe. She had been featured in magazines and documentaries. She had become everything she never dared to dream she could be. But on the night of her Carnegie Hall debut, before she walked out onto that legendary stage, she took a moment to remember where she had come from. She thought about the little girl who used to press imaginary keys on a paper keyboard. She thought about the teenager who ate lunch alone every single day. She thought about all the years of feeling invisible, worthless, like she had nothing to offer the world. And she thought about Mr. Torres. He had passed away 2 years earlier, peacefully in his sleep. Maya had played at his funeral. It was the hardest performance of her life. She carried a photo of him in her bag that night. Before every show, she would look at it and remember his words. "What if you don't fail?" The lights dimmed. The audience fell silent. Maya walked out onto the Carnegie Hall stage, wearing a blue dress with small white flowers that her grandmother had made all those years ago. It was too small now, so she had it altered to fit. She would wear it to every important performance for the rest of her life. She sat at the piano. She placed her hands on the keys, and she played. Afterward, during the standing ovation that seemed to go on forever, Maya looked out at the crowd and thought about all the invisible people in the world. The quiet ones. The overlooked ones. The ones with secret talents and hidden dreams who were too afraid to let anyone see. She hoped somehow they could hear her. She hoped her music could reach them wherever they were, and she hoped they would understand what she had learned through all her years of silence and fear, and finally being brave. Being invisible doesn't mean you have nothing to offer. Sometimes it just means the world hasn't learned to look yet, and when they finally do, when they finally see what you've been carrying inside you all along, they won't just look. They'll stand, they'll cheer, and they'll never forget you.